In 356 BCE, human knowledge was heavily fractured. A physician in Egypt could spend a lifetime recording medical observations, while a Greek mathematician solved complex geometry, and neither would ever hear of the other's work. Without a reliable way to share information, brilliant discoveries rarely crossed regional borders. That geographic isolation began to crack under a young Macedonian prince. Educated by the philosopher Aristotle, Alexander was taught that building an empire was a scientific endeavor, one that required a deep understanding of geography, biology, and the diverse cultures of the territories he intended to govern. Alexander died at just 32, and his massive empire fractured among his generals. Egypt fell to one of his closest commanders, Ptolemy I. Ptolemy recognized that while military victories fade, intellectual achievements endure, and he began constructing a new capital on the Mediterranean coast to reflect that philosophy. By funding researcheries instead of purely expansionist wars, Ptolemy established a state where the systematic collection and documentation of human thought became a primary objective of the government. The Ptolemaic dynasty launched an audacious project. They decided to physically collect every single piece of human knowledge, every poem, philosophical debate, and scientific observation, and house it under one roof in Alexandria. This animated map shows the logistical reality of that ambition. Thousands of scattered data points from across the known world were extracted from their local environments and funneled into a single, highly concentrated node on the Egyptian coast. By gathering these texts into one location, the rulers of Alexandria built an incredibly powerful engine for research. But they also created a massive physical vulnerability. It is the central paradox of the Great Library. They attempted to make human progress immortal by placing every valuable record civilization had ever produced into one highly fragile basket. To fill the shelves, the royal government gave agents immense funding to scour Greece, Persia, and Asia Minor. Their instructions were to buy, borrow, or simply confiscate any valuable manuscript they could find. The city even implemented a strict border policy. When a merchant ship sailed into Alexandria's harbor, it was immediately boarded and searched by officials. They weren't looking for smuggled weapons or untaxed gold. They were hunting for books. Any confiscated scrolls were handed over to scribes. Without printing presses, these men and women copied thousands of texts entirely by hand. A single misplaced word could alter a medical treatment or a mathematical proof, requiring intense, painstaking labor to duplicate the texts accurately. Eventually, the collection grew to hundreds of thousands of scrolls. But a massive archive is useless if a scholar has to search through thousands of unlabeled papyrus rolls just to find one specific document. A scholar named Callimachus solved this logistical nightmare by creating the Ptolemaic. He sorted texts by subject, law, astronomy, and medicine, listed authors alphabetically, and included brief biographical details. By imposing strict categorization on the collection, Callimachus built history's first sophisticated library catalog. He turned a chaotic hoard of paper into a highly functional tool for targeted research. The library was part of a larger institution called the Mauseon. Functioning as the world's first fully state-funded research university, it provided brilliant thinkers with free housing, meals, and salaries, so they could collaborate and debate without the burden of earning a living.
The results of this environment were immediate. Working in Alexandria, a mathematician named Euclid synthesized centuries of scattered mathematical rules into a single logical system of geometry, publishing a work that would be taught in classrooms for the next 2,000 years. This diagram illustrates an observation made by the chief librarian, Eratosthenes. He noted that at noon on the summer solstice, sunlight struck the bottom of a deep well in the city of Syene without casting a shadow. But on that exact same day in Alexandria, a vertical marker produced a distinct shadow. Because the sun's rays arrive parallel to Earth, he realized the shadow was caused by the curvature of the planet itself. By measuring the angle of the shadow in Alexandria and knowing the physical distance between the two cities, Eratosthenes accurately calculated the circumference of the entire Earth. Discoveries like this proved the value of Alexandria's experiment.
The physical universe could be measured and understood through human reason and access to shared data. By the 1st century BCE, the political climate that protected the library was fracturing. Rome was rapidly expanding across the Mediterranean, and the Ptolemaic dynasty was tearing itself apart in a civil war between Cleopatra and her brother. When the Roman general Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt in 48 BCE, he found himself trapped in the middle of this conflict. The streets of Alexandria quickly devolved into a claustrophobic, brutal urban battlefield. Heavily outnumbered, Caesar ordered his men to burn their own ships in the harbor to prevent them from being captured. Driven by strong coastal winds, the flames spread rapidly from the water to the nearby docks and coastal warehouses. This event birthed the legend that Caesar accidentally burned the Great Library to the ground. But historical records show that scholars continue teaching in Alexandria long after Caesar left. The fire likely consumed warehouses holding excess or uncatalogued scrolls near the water, while the primary library escaped intact. History's most famous account of the library's destruction was an exaggeration. It was a severe blow to the collection, but it wasn't the event that ended it. The actual killer of the library was much quieter than a massive fire. After Rome took control of Egypt, the institution suffered through centuries of budget cuts, institutional neglect, and rulers who no longer saw the value in funding independent academic research. Over hundreds of years, the physical buildings fell into disrepair. Local conflicts, riots, and eventually massive earthquakes caused the grand architecture to collapse, with much of the ancient city slowly sinking beneath the rising waters of the Mediterranean. Yet the ideas housed inside did not completely vanish. Because the library functioned as an active hub for centuries, visiting scholars had carefully copied works on medicine, astronomy, and philosophy, carrying those texts back to Rome, Byzantium, and the Middle East, long before the physical buildings collapsed. Today, a modern institution, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, stands near the ancient site, built to reflect the exact same principles of cross-cultural study and open access to information. The legacy of Alexandria proves that you cannot make knowledge immortal by locking it away in a single, heavily guarded vault. Information only survives time and disaster when it is widely distributed, freely copied, and shared across the world.